Thank you guys all so much for being here today. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is James Mann. I'm the Global Marketing Director for International Student Exchange and Student Management Group. We're going to be covering our USA J-1 Public High School program today. I'm joined by my colleague Sasha, who's going to be assisting me in the presentation. If you could, please just keep your microphones muted during the presentation. We'll allow for questions in the chat, or we'll allow for you to speak as well at the end. But we have a lot of material to cover, so we'd like to get through the presentation first and then allow for questions at the end.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, our partners and friends. It's good to see you all today. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Bayshore, and thank you actually for giving us a chance to put a dress shirt during this quarantine time. And I can see that James got a haircut specifically for this webinar as well. So this training probably will take about an hour, maybe a little bit over an hour. So please make yourself comfortable. James?
Thank you very much. So like I said, we're going to be covering the J-1 high school program. This is likely the program that most of you know quite well already, but we will cover all of the major details of the program today. So for those of you that are newer to this program, this will be a great training. And for those of you that have worked with the program for a while, it will be a good refresher on how the overall program operates. So before we get into the details of the program, I like to talk a little bit about International Student Exchange. We are an authorized sponsor of J-1 students now for over 30 years. We welcome, in a normal year, close to 3,000 students every year on J-1 high school programs. And the J-1 program was really created by the United States government and sponsored by the government to strengthen relations between the US and other countries, to bring people and students from all over the world to the United States to share their culture with Americans, and to allow Americans to also share their culture with the global community. It's an academic program as much as it is a cultural program. It, of course, provides students with an excellent opportunity to improve their English skills as well. But it's really the overall experience that we emphasize for the J-1 high school program. They'll have a full high school, American high school experience during their semester or academic year, but they'll also make friends and often refer to their host families and some of the friends they make as family after they complete their programs. The J-1 visa itself is a fairly strict visa. It's a single-use, non-renewable visa. So it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity is really the way I like to refer to it. This J-1 visa is really something that you can only do once for a high school program and for a maximum of an academic year, which is 10 months. But in general, when we talk about how the program works, students are placed at local public high schools all across the United States. We place in nearly every state, all 50 states. Students are placed with volunteer host families, and all students will have an ISE, local area representative, assigned to them, which will assist both the student and the host family in making sure that everyone is having a safe and successful experience. And the support for the students is really an aspect of the program that we emphasize, because we want all of our students to be safe. We want all of them to enjoy their experiences. And we also want to make sure that our host families are providing the program and the experience that our international students have come to expect from ISE. Sasha, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add before I move forward.
Well, just one thing. I mean, J-1 probably is the most affordable program in the world, and this program is popular everywhere, really. Some agencies are really just focused on this program. So from one side, it's a fantastic program when students actually return home very independent, very mature. Probably about 90% of the students are happy. At the same time, we rely on you as our partners and international representatives to prepare students for this program. I did this program myself. It was a great experience. I was in Farmington, Missouri, in the middle of nowhere, in the small town, and I'm still in touch with my host family. That was a few years ago.
And that's really the type of experience that we love to hear about. And I do hear from our partners and from former students every year that the bond and the relationship that they form with their host families, as well as other students at the schools that they attend, are eternal. They last forever. And they keep in touch and they visit each other and maintain that relationship for much longer than just the 10 months or the 5 months that they're in the United States. Before we move on into any more detailed information, our social media manager has begged us to please ask you guys, follow us on social media. We really are working hard to make our social media pages more engaging and more exciting for both our partners and for students. So if you guys could please like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, we would really appreciate that. We also would encourage you to send any photos or testimonials that you have from students who have studied with us and had good experiences. Please share those with us so that we can share them on our social media, or even share them on your own channel and then let us know, and we'd be glad to reshare them through our channels as well. It's a great way for us to keep in contact and to share the experiences that our students have had over the years with SMG and ISE's programs. And we'll send you guys links to everything also by email afterwards. So moving back to the program, there are some deadlines that we like to make sure we mention when we talk about the J-1 high school program, because there are deadlines for applications, there are deadlines for when students can receive their placements. And so we talk about the application, the deadline for August intake. So for this coming August, for example, the deadline was May 1st. We are still considering applications right now on a case-by-case basis, just due to the current situation. And obviously things are a little bit different this year than in past years. And I'm sure many of you guys will have questions specifically about that, which we'll be glad to address, at the end of the presentation. But in a normal year and under normal circumstances, the application deadlines for August would be May 1st, whether it's an academic year or a semester program, and for January intake, because there are just the 2 intakes for J1, August and January. So August is May 1st, and January, the deadline is November 1st. And then we have some other deadlines that ISE has to meet, so that we have to meet when we're placing a student in a host family and in a school. And the placement deadline for August programs is September 1st. The placement deadline for January programs is January 16th. And we mentioned that that's important to mention because, with the J1 program, it's very unique in that the placements can come really anytime between when you submit the application, or rather when ISE approves the application, and these deadlines that you see here on this slide. So it's important that the students and their parents understand that, and they have those fair expectations that their placement, they might not know exactly where they're going in the United States until these dates. Now, these are the latest possible dates to receive a placement, and we work really hard every year to place students a lot sooner than that. But it is best to play it safe and manage expectations, and make sure the students and their parents understand that they could get a placement as late as midnight on August 31st, or as late as midnight on January 15th if they were a January student. Sometimes the deadlines change. In certain years, this past year, for example, August 2019 intake, the deadline ended up being extended because it was a holiday weekend on the technical deadline, so they extended it a few days. So that can happen, and we'll always make sure that we notify you. But generally speaking, these are the deadlines that we adhere to. So ISE has a lot of responsibility here when we run this program, obviously, but there are a few things that, are always guaranteed that we will be providing and really fall within ISE's service and within the program that we provide. So all students, as I said before, will be placed in volunteer host families for either a school year or a semester, which is 10 months or 5 months. These are volunteer host families. They do not receive any compensation for their hosting. They do this strictly for the experience, to have a young person from somewhere else in the world in their home, to share that experience, create that relationship. In terms of finding the host families, it's ISE's responsibility to ensure that that host family is well suited to host a student safely and to provide a good experience for them. And we have a lot of procedures and policy in place to ensure that we carefully screen and personally interview and visit each home, each host family prior to a student's arrival, to ensure that they meet all the requirements and adhere to all the Department of State regulations that are put in place for this program. Because it is a government-sponsored program, there are a lot of regulations and there's a lot of oversight that comes from the government, which we have to adhere to. ISE often takes it a little bit further, and our guidelines tend to be even more strict. We have a higher standard for placements than even the government requires, and we do that often just because we want to make sure that we're providing the safest and most high quality experience for the students. But there are certain policies and procedures that the Department of State as well has put in place for this program, and it's very important to us that we follow them. One of those requirements is that we run a criminal background check on every host family member, depending on the state, either over 17 or 18 living in the home. And you guys will be provided with a comprehensive overview of who the host family is, who lives in the home, pictures of the home, so that the students know where they're going and who they're going to be living with. We're also going to arrange for the placement in the local school and enrollment at the local public school. We guarantee that the student will have an academic experience here in the United States, but we cannot guarantee that they will graduate, especially because this is a one-year program. It's important to keep in mind that it often takes at least 2 years to earn the diploma here in the United States. And so for a one-year program, it can be challenging. It is possible. We do have some exceptional students every year that earn the diploma, but it's important to mention that this is not a diploma earning program. It's not the purpose of the program. While it is a possibility with students that work really hard and have the right placement, it's not necessarily guaranteed. But what is guaranteed is that every student will be placed in a local public school. They will have a volunteer host family. They'll have an area representative assigned to them. And ISE will also provide the documentation required to get the J-1 visa. So we will provide the DS 2019 form, which is the most important document for applying for the J-1 visa. And in past years, we were able to pay SEVIS on behalf of our students. This year, given all of the uncertainty and just the changes and challenges that we're facing, we are asking that all of our partners pay SEVIS directly for their students. But we do expect that we will return back to offering the option of paying on your behalf in the future. So, we've talked generally about the program, volunteer host families, public schools, academic, cultural experience, but how do we prepare them? How do we apply them for the program? And we'll talk about the application process. Sasha, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to add yet.
Not yet, James. You're doing a great job.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm not going too fast and talking past you. Okay, so for the student application process, we have a wonderful system. Every partner that I've ever spoken to over my 5 years of working for International Student Exchange has told me that they really appreciate and like our system, especially those that have used other ones like Zap. They find the exit system to be really easy to use and very useful in a lot of ways because everything is in one place. So for all of our programs, in the past month, we've given several webinars on the various SMG programs. And today we're talking about our ISE program, but every single one of them has their application in our Exits online system. And we can set up an account for all of our partners, which allow you to then log in and manage all of your students' applications in one place with ISE and SMG. You have two options when a student is completing an application in Exits. The first option, and this is the option that I recommend, but it's entirely your decision, is to provide the student's username and password so that they can then log in on their computer at home and complete their application. Once they've completed their application, it will be submitted to you for review. And then once you've reviewed it and approved it, it will be submitted to ISE for approval. The other option is for you to just fill out the entire application on behalf of the student. And I know that a lot of our partners do this as well. In this scenario, it's pretty much you would have the students submit the documents to you in whichever process you feel is most appropriate, but then you would complete the application in our system. All applications must be submitted online. We cannot accept paper applications or emailed applications because the process doesn't end when the application is submitted. Your student's profile will be created and exits, flight information will be put there, progress reports, incident reports, DS form verifications, all of these things happen in our exits online system, which is really actually very convenient because you're able to manage all of your students for all of our programs in one place.
James, if I may, just what you said, we're using the same application for all of our programs. Doesn't matter if it's a J1, F1 private, basic choice, F1 public, Canada, even UK, we use exactly the same app. So it's it makes your life so much easier. And also for J1 public program, for the next August 2021, we'll start accepting applications in September. So you can actually start submitting your apps pretty much in 3 months.
Yeah, and I know that's something that we've been doing more and more the last few years is opening up the application earlier for future intakes, because more and more each year there are students that want to apply early, and you know, we're glad to get applications as early as we can because that allows us more time to start searching for host families and working on getting placements at schools as well. But some tips for the student application process, you know, these are some important tips when we talk about trying to get placements earlier rather than later. These are the types of things that are really help with getting the application approved quickly, but also with getting a host family quickly as well. So we want to know as much about the student as we can. We want to know what their interests are. What are they passionate about? What are their hobbies? There's a portion of the application where there's photos. We want photos of them smiling, spending time with family and friends, photos that represent who they are, what they care about, who they spend their time with, to give potential host families a real illustration of who that student is. And then, of course, the student and parent letters are very important. So the students will write a letter as well as their parents. We want them to write about themselves, what they're hoping to gain from their experience, why they want to do this type of program, those types of things. And then, you know, talk about what they're interested in. We have a very thorough acceptance criteria. And so when we talk about the more technical portions of the application, grades, English level, medical requirements, there are some certain things that we like to mention. Number one, students must have an intermediate level of English. So for the J1 high school program, we consider that around a 220 on the old score of the LTIS test. I know there's new scoring now. I believe, Sasha, if you could help me, I think it's 689 was what we set for the new score. But I will confirm that for all of you and let you know for sure exactly what the LTIS test score is required for the English level. But in terms of some other important aspects to be aware of, students must be able to live with cats, dogs. Nearly all volunteer host families have pets on this program. And so for us to be able to place them and be able to guarantee placement by those deadlines that I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we can't accept students that are not able to live with dogs or cats. If they have a mild allergy and they can treat it with medication, which allows them to live comfortably in a home that has pets, then we can still consider them. And then in terms of grades, we're looking for students that have passing grades, which on the American grading scale is a minimum of a C+. So if students are failing or struggling in their courses in their home country, we're often not able to accept them on this J1 high school program because we're not able to guarantee that they'll have the academic support, additional academic support and resources that they'll need in order to be successful. And of course, if a student's struggling in school in their native language, we can't expect them to do much better here in you know, learning all of their courses in English. So Some other important components of the student application, the questionnaire, which is a questionnaire that we ask you guys to please administer to the students. It gives a good idea of their command of the English language and really what they're looking to get out of the program. Of course, more detailed and technical requirements are those grades that I mentioned. But in addition to that, there are a lot of immunization and health records that are required. We want to make sure that students that are coming on this program will be able to do it healthily and safely. And so we do require immunizations and health records that we must review prior to accepting students. Each individual immunization requirement is outlined in detail in the application. All of these pages must have the necessary signatures from doctors, teachers, the students, and their natural parents. And then right now, for example, we're in a unique time where it's more difficult than normal to get some of these official documents, particularly documents from schools, because many schools are closed, or from doctors, because many of them are, busy dealing with the crisis that we're facing. And so we're trying to be lenient and flexible with those documents in accepting applications conditionally with the expectation that those documents will be provided before the student comes. But generally speaking, when we talk about the process and how to ensure that you get acceptance the first time you submit an application, it's to make sure that you complete all of these documents accurately, make sure that they all have the signatures, and upload everything clearly into exits. Once the application is submitted, ISE, our organization, will notify you that the application has been received, and then we will notify you that when it moves to being under review. And then, of course, once it's been accepted, you will receive the acceptance notification. I often get the question, how long does it take to get acceptance? It really does depend on when you submit the application, as well as how the application is completed. However, generally, the maximum amount of time that you would wait until receiving an acceptance notification is about 2 weeks. But sometimes it's as little as 2 days. So it really does vary, but I would say if you don't receive acceptance after submitting an application within 2 weeks, please send us an email, because there's a possibility maybe that it didn't get sent and you thought it did. We see that every year where it's sitting still with our international agents because their students completed it and submitted it to them, and they thought that was going to go all the way to us, but there actually is one more step to submit it to us. And that's just an important aspect to keep in mind.
And for new agencies, for new partners, we offer online trainings for our application. We do this once a month, or we can actually email you the recorded version. It's not a rocket science. It's a comprehensive application. And for the first time, it may look a little bit, too much, but then once you get used how to use it, it's so much easier. By the way, if you have any questions regarding the current training presentation, please feel free to actually ask, write in the chat, in the general chat, and then we'll respond after the presentation.
Yeah, I do see that people have been writing in the chat, and I promise you at the end, I will stay until I read through each individual question and address each one. And we are also recording this webinar, and it will be posted on our agent resources as well. And so for the application, there's a portion for regional and state preferences. Now, these are preferences, they are not guarantees, but they are a way for students to have a better idea of where they're going. Because when we talk about the J-1 program in general, it is a no-choice high school program. And what that means is the students could be placed anywhere in the United States when they apply for J-1. If you have a student that has a very specific experience in mind and they only want to go to Florida or they only want to go to California, this program is probably not the best fit for them. We have other programs, which we have talked about in previous webinars, that are a good fit for those students that want something specific. However, if you do have students that have a preference and they'd like to be in California or they'd like to be in New York, we do allow them to elect regional and state preferences for an additional fee. And we do our best to accommodate these preferences. I think this past year, 2019, 2020, we accommodated about 70% of our state preferences and about 85% of our regional preferences. The way the regional preferences work is there's 4 regions: East, South, Central, and West. You can see in the application, as well as on this slide, which states are included in each region. and students can elect one of those regions, and we will work hard and do our best to place them within that area. The other option is the state preference. We ask that students elect 3 states that they'd like to be placed in, and then we will also do our best to try and place them in one of those 3 states. We will only charge the additional fee if we fulfill the preference, but it is not guaranteed. We do our best. Early applications definitely help us to fulfill these preferences, and there is a very high success rate for them. But again, it's still important for the students and their natural parents to know that there's a possibility they don't get their preference when applying to the program.
And don't forget that for those students who would like to apply for California, it's a big state. So sometimes our students are placed close to the border with the state of Nevada. It's still California, but not exactly Malibu.
That's exactly right. So that's a great point, Sasha. I mean, it's California is a great example. Texas is a very good example where, they could be placed anywhere within that state. So if they elect the California state preference and they're imagining that they're going to be in LA or San Francisco, the J-1 program likely isn't going to place in a big city location. Most J-1 placements are in more rural, remote parts, even of those more popular states for students. Okay, so you've applied the student, they've decided whether or not they want to do preferences, and they've been accepted into the program, and now what comes next? So we're going to issue, of course, acceptance documents and everything that's needed in order for the student to get their visa. We're going to work hard to try and get you a host family, to get that student a host family and a school placement as soon as possible. And as soon as we do, we will give you that information. But please tell all of the natural parents that ISE can place your student any day from acceptance until those deadlines that we talked about in the beginning of the presentation, depending on which intake they're doing. But a couple other things that we're going to talk about next is, what is a host family application? What is a double placement? What is a self-placement? So host family application, when you're completing an application for the students, you see how many forms have to be completed, how many documents have to be submitted, and host families fill out a very similar or go through a very similar process to become a host family. They also complete a comprehensive application so that ISE has a comprehensive understanding of who that host family is and whether or not they're suited to host an international student. We put here, what is a double placement? That's really important to understand because double placements, especially on the J-1 program, are extremely common. A double placement is a placement in a host family that's hosting another international student. And many of our placements are double placements. And so we like to make sure we mention this. Now, they'll always be placed with an international student from a different country and that speaks a different native language. So we would never place a student from Spain with another student from Spain. But there is a possibility that we place a student from Spain with a student from Vietnam, for example. And that's something that happens very, very often. And then the last question on this slide, what is a self-placement? This is a placement in a host family that you have found or that your student knows in the United States. That is, when you submit the application, you would mark a certain portion of the app to note this, but it essentially means that you would have a host family already picked out for your student that's willing to host them. And then we can go through the process to make sure that they meet all of the requirements and that the school that host family lives near is accepting international students. But self-placements are excellent for the J-1 program because we talk about how they can be placed anywhere. They don't know where they're going. They can get their placement anytime from a program acceptance to those deadlines. If you do a self-placement, you know where your student's going, you know what school they're attending, you know who their host family is going to be, and you typically have that information a lot sooner. There's also a small discount for self-placements as well. So those are really great. They're not very, very common because of course it's difficult for students from Spain to know host families in the United States. And that's a big part of what we do in finding the host families for our students. But if you have a student that knows someone in the United States that's willing to host them and is not related to them, because that's a J-1 program regulation, we can accommodate them with a self-placement. Our student orientation, which sadly has been canceled this year due to the current situation, this is a program that I've developed and that I've run now for the last 5 years. It's an optional arrival orientation. So all students will receive an orientation when they arrive to their placement in the United States. So if they're going to Houston, they'll get their placement they'll get their orientation when they get there. But we also offer this optional supplemental orientation in New York City. We have 3 different sessions. They're 4 days each. We assign them to a session based on when their school start date is, when they're supposed to arrive in the United States. But it's an excellent program. The students love it. I enjoy it because I get to meet students, which is not something I get to do as often as I'd like. And the students get to experience, in my opinion, now I'm biased as a New Yorker, but they get to experience the best city in the United States for a couple of days. It's 4 days, but there's pretty much an arrival day in the beginning, departure day at the end. The 2 days in the middle are filled with sightseeing, professionally tour guided sightseeing all around New York City. And we hit all of the major sites. We eat really well. The students spend time with many other international students from all over the world that are about to embark on the same experience that they are. So it's a really great buffer and kind of beginning to their program. And we do also do a workshop in the morning of the second day where we have one of our student facilitators from our New York office come talk about guidelines for success, tips for, making sure they make the most out of their program, and of course reviewing the rules and probably many of the things that they have been reviewed already with you, and that will be reviewed again when they get to their host family. But we do make sure we cover those topics at this program as well, in addition to all the fun sightseeing and great food that they get to eat during that program. So let's talk about the American host family, because I think, generally speaking, this is the most important part of any international student's high school program experience. American host families generally consist of 2 parents and children. However, that is not always the case. We have, as I'm sure many of you know, all over the world, there are different structures of families everywhere. But generally speaking, if there's a non-traditional placement, which is a placement with single parents or with same-sex parents, we would request approval from you guys and from your students and their natural parents before we finalize that placement. And so single parents are very common in the United States, and many of our host families are single parents. And so the definition of the family can really be up for interpretation. However, if a placement is not considered traditional, you will have the opportunity to reject that placement. I would encourage against it because, I do feel that any placement that we confirm it because we think they're a good fit for your student. Some expectations. Once a placement has been finalized for your students, we will send you the information and we will ask you to ask your student to please reach out to their host family to start getting to know them, to start preparing for their program. But we do encourage your students to make that first contact. Many of the families will communicate by email or by text message. I know, obviously, I'm sure many of us use WhatsApp and those types of communication tools. However, the student and the host family are comfortable communicating before they come, we are perfectly fine with. But it's definitely important that you prepare the students and that they start to prepare themselves for the experience that they're going to have and the change in culture and lifestyle that they will experience, and also to practice their English as much as they can, as they are going to be in an English immersive experience when they arrive here. And when we talk about host family placements, it's important that the students are prepared to adapt to their surroundings. The J-1 program specifically has a lot of placements in rural, more remote places, small towns, villages, farm communities throughout the United States. And many of our placements are in areas like that. So for those students coming from Milan or coming from Madrid or coming from Paris or from Sao Paulo or major cities all over the world, those placements in those communities are going to be really different than what they're used to, which I think is incredibly valuable to broaden their horizons and their global perspective. But it is important for our partners, for you guys, to set that tone, set that expectation that they're going to be placed in a place, in a home and in a community that's going to be different from what they're used to. And that's one of the major points of the program, is to take students outside of their comfort zone and allow them that experience. And we're not going to change a student's host family placement, and we're not going to allow a student to reject a host family placement because they don't like the town that it's in. They think it's too small, or there's not enough students, or not, there's not a big mall nearby, or it's missing something like that. They have to adapt to the community that they're placed in. And that's a big expectation of the J-1 program that is super, super important for our partners to share with any prospective students, as well as their natural parents.
As we usually say, it's not right or wrong, it's just different. And students are not going to be guests of the family, they're going to be members of the host family. And it's important that they sit, when they first arrive to the States, they sit together with the host family and ask them, what are your expectations? What I'm supposed to do? What are my responsibilities? Oh, you're supposed to clean your bedroom, bathroom, and help us, to cook sometimes, so clean here or there. You're supposed to be home by 9 p.m. on weekdays. So as long as the host family and the student speak about all the rules on the first day or second day of their arrival, and they have the same expectations from each other, it will avoid lots of potential issues.
Exactly. Insurance. This year we actually changed our insurance provider, but the coverage itself it hasn't changed much at all. We provide with all of our students the same two levels of insurance that they, as agents, you can choose either the ultimate level or the exclusive level for all of your students. And the policy includes medical coverage, travel emergencies, third-party liability. It's a very standard baseline insurance coverage for students that are coming on the program, and it is mandatory. This is something that we have to administer to remain CSIET compliant, which is a Department of State regulated authorization council for placements. The departure packet. So I had mentioned, you'll get an acceptance package for all of your students. Again, the most important document, which is something that ISE issues, and we do our best to issue it as early as possible so that you can start the visa application process as soon as possible. And that's the DS 2019 form. But we'll also provide the student ID card and insurance card by email and through exits. We have just this past week actually sent out an update for our student handbook. I sent that email earlier in the week. We try to update the handbook every year. And then they'll also need the CVIS receipt. And then we do offer trips year to year. The trips for this year are looking like they will be canceled, again, just due to all the uncertainty. However, under normal circumstances, there are some trips provided through an ISE partner that administers the trip programs for the students.
James, if I may, on the previous slide, our new insurance that covers COVID-19, it's considered as a regular flu. We checked with our insurance company and all the expenses will be covered.
Yeah, thank you actually for reminding me of that, because I have been in touch with our insurance company personally, directly, to talk specifically about coverage of COVID-19 treatment for students, and they have assured us that it will be completely covered under the insurance, just as if they caught a really bad flu, it's in terms of the insurance, it's treated the same way as any regular illness that a student could contract while on the program. And so they'll have the full benefits and full coverage for COVID-19 for next year and for the future. So let's talk about communication. There are a lot of different parties and people involved in administering this program successfully and safely for all of our students. There are the facilitators and student services people in our New York office. And those are the people that you guys need to know the best, because they're going to be the ones that you speak with the most. But then we also have our local area representatives and regional managers all throughout the United States. And those are the people in the local communities overseeing the students, working with the host families and with the schools to ensure the safety and success of all of our students. But we require that all of our international partners, you guys, communicate through our New York office, our student services department. Every single student that applies and is accepted with ISE is assigned a student facilitator in our New York office, and they will be your main contact for that student for the duration of their program. Each student is also assigned an area representative. However, we will be the ones communicating with that area representative. We must have all of the communication go through our New York office from our international partners to manage this communication effectively, to make sure that we're following procedure, and to make sure that our area reps and regional managers aren't receiving conflicting information. It's super, super important that we maintain these lines of communication and we follow this procedure to make sure that we can administer the program successfully and safely. So if your student has questions when they arrive in the United States, they are more than welcome and actually encouraged to contact their area representative. We want our students to feel comfortable talking to their local support. That's super important. But if the mother of that student is contacting the host family and the area representative, guys, and everybody's getting involved, it can create more issues than it can help. And I think, Sasha, you have some things to add about this since you've worked with this more.
Yes, thank you, James. We do encourage, of course, please ask your students to speak to their local area reps when they have any questions. Sometimes they say, oh, I think my area rep is a good friend of the host family. I don't feel comfortable speaking to this person. Okay, there is a regional advisor or there is a regional manager. Students can always call our New York office. We have facilitators who actually, they're collecting all the pieces of information from different sites. As you know, on each story, there are different sites. I like to use this example when a student arrived to the United States and he was missing his breakfast. I think it was a Brazilian student. He was missing his French bread. Then he called his natural mother and said, you know, I miss my bread, right, in the mornings for breakfast. And then the natural mother called our partner in Brazil, then the partner called New York office, and then New York to the regional manager. And then at the end of the story, the student was starving and he lost about 10 kilos. So the story changes a lot by the end. So it's important that actually a student speaks directly either to a host family or his or her local area rep or at least regional manager or advisor.
Thank you, Sasha. Some other policies. Like I said, this is a government-sponsored program, so we have to adhere to the federal government laws in relation to the J-1 program, to state laws for the academics, and then of course ISE has our own rules and policies. We encourage all of our students to review the handbook with our partners before they come so they're aware of the rules. We encourage them to sit down with their host families, talk about the rules and policies, and this will help ensure that they have a good transition and that they aren't sent home. And that's something that we really want to avoid, of course, for all of our students. If there are any issues that come up, they really should rely on their area representative. That is their local person or their host family. You know, if the issue is with the host family, then we encourage the students to speak with their area rep. If the issue is, of course, something else, then they can speak with their host family as well. They have that support for them. And if for whatever reason they're not comfortable speaking with either of them, either their host family or their area rep, they can also call the facilitator, their assigned facilitator in the New York office directly. But it is important that they understand that area rep is there to help them adjust, to make sure that they're being safe, and to address any questions or concerns that they might have. And it's so important that the students understand that we're here to support them and ensure their safety and success, and that they trust us. Just in terms of some other policies, students are not permitted to travel on their own. There are ISE sponsored trips. There are approvals that can be given for other trips with the host family or perhaps with friends, as long as there's someone to supervise. But that's something that would be approved on a case-by-case basis. Generally speaking, independent travel is not permitted. If a student is dismissed from the school due to poor English skills, unfortunately, we have to send that student home. And that's why when we talked about the application earlier, We talked about the minimum requirements. There's an LTIS, there's a questionnaire, and it's important that these procedures and these parts of the process are followed carefully, because if their English level is misrepresented on their application, and when they arrive to the United States, they're not able to perform in school at the minimum level that's required, they will unfortunately be sent home. So problem solving, and I'm going to start to speed up a little bit because I think we're spending a lot of time on this very detailed nitty gritty stuff, which is important, but a little bit less exciting. When we talk about problem solving, we have a lot of process that we have to follow. So there are forms that are completed and procedures that are followed with each of these incidents that we may encounter. And all of these documents are uploaded in exits. Everything is documented and recorded so that we can make sure that the student has a fair evaluation of what's going on and that there's a solution can be found. Everything that we do is solution oriented. We want to find solutions. We want to ensure the student's success and make sure that everyone's enjoying the program within the parameters that have been set. School involvement, one way to avoid a student having any sort of trouble with their program is for them to get involved as much as possible. Students, we say busy students stay out of trouble, so the students that engage in the community and, pursue the opportunities that schools provide for them are going to make the most out of their experience. They're going to improve their English the fastest. And they're going to really, have the most beneficial program that they can have. And often, the students that do these clubs and sports, it's one way for them to practice their English without even realizing that they're practicing English, because they're just in a practical environment of having to use it. Extensions. So I mentioned earlier, there are the different intakes, and there are semester programs available that start in August. And we have many students that come in August for a semester program. They fall in love with their school, they love their host family, and they realize that 5 months is not nearly enough. They want the full 10-month academic year. And we do allow students to extend. We typically set a deadline of around the same deadline for a January intake to confirm extensions. So if a student that comes in August wants to extend, we're going to ask that they confirm that by November 1st, and then we'll go through the process. We don't guarantee extensions. The school has to agree to it as well as the host family. But typically, if a student's having a very positive program and wants to stay, both of those other parties are in agreement for them to stay as well. Convalidation, I know this doesn't apply to everyone. However, we do offer third-party convalidation services for all of our students that want it. We've partnered with a company called convalidationservices.com. It's an international student documentation service. They specialize in this process. We had managed it independently in past years, and it's a complicated process. I'm sure as many of you know that do it, and it's tedious, and there's a lot of administrative work that needs to be done. And we've found that it would be better and more beneficial really for the students to utilize a third-party service that is specialized in doing this process. And I know, Sasha, you've worked specifically with this process with a lot of your students, and so I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
No problem. It's a good company, very organized. They do this fast. It really depends also on the school, but so far we haven't had any issues. In general, it costs about $350, including FedEx shipment.
Perfect. Placements. Like we said, we're going to place students with volunteer host families and in public schools. This is one of our most challenging tasks, is finding volunteer host families and public schools for nearly 3,000 students every year. We do it successfully every year. We place all of our students by the deadline. Every year that I've worked for ISE, so for the last 5 years, but I'm told that even for 25 years before that, we've always placed all of our students by the deadline. So typically, once a student's been accepted by ISE, that's guaranteeing placement by the deadline. But they do have to be patient and understand that that placement could come as late as those dates that we outlined earlier in the presentation. As soon as you're notified of the placement, you should tell the student so that they can begin to communicate with their host family. Natural families. We are fortunate, I think Sasha and myself, we don't work with the natural families too often. I know that's a difficult, very difficult part. And I have a lot of respect and admiration for all of our partners that work with these natural families, because I know it can be challenging. So when you are doing an orientation with the natural families, we insist that you manage their expectations as best as possible. And you can do that by outlining a few of these things that we've listed here, which is they can't come with their student to the United States. That's not permitted. They're also, under normal circumstances, not permitted to visit during the program. They can visit at the very end, but not during the program. They should try to limit their phone calls. I know, again, a lot of the mothers and fathers are used to speaking to their son or daughter every day. But we really do encourage them to limit those phone calls, because we find that more frequent phone calls lead to homesickness. They lead to the student not engaging with their host family or with their peers at school, rather just speaking to their friends and family at home, and that ends up making it more difficult for them to adapt. We also ask that the natural family not contact us directly. We prefer everything to go through your office. Our office is primarily English speaking, and we understand that the initial relationship between the natural family and our organization is through our international partners. And therefore, we do rely on you guys to manage all communication from the natural parents and natural families. They should not be contacting field staff. They should not even really be contacting our headquarters. We will rely entirely on our partnerships and our partners overseas to manage that aspect of the communication.
One thing I wanted to mention, James, is as soon as the student arrives to the United States, IEC is responsible for the student. So sometimes we have students who would arrive to New York, would like to spend a few days with their uncle or aunt, and then fly to the host family. It's not possible, because if something happens to the student, IEC will be in trouble, and the Department of State can actually give us a fine for that. So students need to fly directly to their host family. As James said, natural parents can actually come at the end of the program, as long as the host family is okay with that. You know, many of them actually attend a graduation or a prom, and then they can travel together. That's possible, but not before. Okay, even if uncle or aunt will write a letter that I'm responsible for this student, before he or she will actually travel to their host family, it doesn't matter. So it's very important that they fly directly from their local airport to the local airport of the host family.
At the end of the program, students should have flights booked for their return 10 weeks prior to their end date. And when you get a placement for a student, it tells you what their program start date as well as what their program end date is. The reason why they don't need to have that flight right from the very beginning is if they are graduating, or if there's a certain event that they decide they want to attend and the host family agrees. Sometimes the departure date can vary, but we do need those flights confirmed generally about 2.5 months prior to departure. And all students are asked to leave the host family home within 5 days of the last day of school. As soon as that deadline is met, so 5 days after the last day of school, that also is when ISE's local support is concluded, as well as the insurance coverage. And if students are having their natural family come and meet them and traveling throughout the United States at the end of their program, then they can extend their insurance directly in the portal. So that's something that they are able to do. Students' flights, all flight information, as with everything with the students, is going to be uploaded into exits. There's a flight upload section of the website once you're logged in, and it's incredibly important that it is uploaded there, because flights that are uploaded into that system are then shared with several other systems. With, it impacts CVIS, it notifies our field staff, it notifies our facilitators, and this is how we manage the program effectively. So it's really important that flight information is uploaded in exits in a timely fashion and accurately. Transportation. I know we're already at 11 a.m., so I'm trying to just go a little faster. But transportation, each student is going to have a transfer provided for them for their arrival and for their departure from from the airport to their host family, and then from their host family back to the airport. And that's something that is included in the program. However, students will be asked to fly into a specific airport based on their placement. If they're not able to get a flight to the designated airport, there could be additional fees in arranging a special transfer. The IFF, which is the International Foreign Family, this is a special type of placement. I'm not going to go into the details now, again, because I feel like we are running out of time in a little bit. So if you have questions about this, feel free to contact me. This is more of a boarding accommodation. It's many international students in a home. It's in the eastern part of Oregon, and they get to do a lot of outdoor activities and have a lot of other international students in a dorm-like setting. So it is a very different setup from the typical volunteer host family arrangement that we have for most of our students. There is a private high school option for the J-1 program. By default, students are placed in public schools. However, we do have some smaller private school options where students can pay an additional fee on top of the program fee. They're able to elect a range of pricing based on what they're able to afford. And then we will place them in a private school that has tuition within that range of fees. Students are still placed with volunteer host families. With this, they just attend a private school. They're generally smaller private schools with Christian or Catholic affiliations. The trips we spoke about, it does look like they're going to be canceled for this year, but we try to offer opportunities for our students to experience different parts of the United States while they're here on their program. You know, and we understand that many of them are in more rural, remote parts of the United States. And so we offer in normal years trips to Los Angeles, to Washington, D.C., to New York, so that students can experience these beautiful cities in addition to having their more rural, probably remote experience for the majority of their program. We also often offer trips to Hawaii, Boston, Philadelphia as well. Cancellations and refunds. Generally speaking, once a student arrives on their program, all fees are non-refundable, but cancellation before arrival has a couple of variables. If they haven't been placed yet and they cancel, it's a full refund. If they cancel after receiving their host family, it's a $750 non-refundable fee. Students that leave the program early voluntarily or are expelled because of behavioral issues or problems at the school or with the host family are also not eligible for a refund. Selling the U.S. public high school program. Things to be aware of and issues and arguments and disagreements that can be avoided is all the things that I've already mentioned, I think, throughout this presentation, but I'll relist them one more time, is that students understand they can be placed anywhere in the United States on this program, typically more rural, remote locations. If they're expecting to be placed with high upper class mansions, in Hollywood Hills, they're likely to be disappointed on this program. It's mostly middle class families that students are placed with. And students are not guests in the home. They're going to be a part of the family, which means they contribute to the home and they help out around the house. It's also not an athletic program. So many of our students do participate in athletics, and we encourage that. I think it's great for them to do that. It's a great way for them to integrate into their high school experience. But students should not come on this program with athletics as their main motivator to do it, because we can't guarantee that the school that they're placed at will have the athletic sport that they're interested in, or we can't guarantee that they'll make the team or that they'll allow international students to participate. Most schools do. Nearly all of our students do also participate in sports in some way or another on the program, but it's not the main purpose. So we have some photos here to go through, but we're at 11:05 a.m. now. We wanted to focus for this presentation on the more detailed aspects of expectations, how the program operates, rather than focus on marketing aspects. I'm always glad to do individual calls and Skype calls and answer emails of questions that you guys have about those types of things or anything about the program. We will be sharing this full presentation as well as a recording of the webinar probably early next week for you guys to be able to watch. But with that said, I think we can move now to the question and answer portion of the webinars, unless Sasha, there's anything else that you'd like to add.
We can definitely start responding to questions. Just one thing I wanted to remind everyone, especially our current partners who have students with us last year, if you could share with us your social media posts or send us the pictures of your students with a small description, I would really appreciate that. I would love to share this on our social media as well, especially for our SMG programs such as F1 Private, Choice, Basic, F1 Public Canada, or even UK.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to start with the questions, guys. It seems like there's a good number of them, and you can continue to send them in the chat. And then even when I finish answering, if you want to speak up and chat, I have another 45 minutes until my next meeting, so I think we'll be able to get through everything. Oh, actually, earlier in the presentation, I had said the LTIS scores, minimum scores 221. On the new version, it's going to be 689. So I did get it right. Okay, that's good. One question for students that are transferring, which is very common right now. Actually, let's take a moment and just comment on the current situation. I think, Sasha, that would be a good idea. Just so right now, obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty with what's going on. Numbers are getting better here in the United States in regards to COVID-19. We're continuing to place students. We're continuing to accept applications. We remain optimistic that the program will run in the fall. Whether there's a late start date or that there's an online portion involved for many of these students, those are things that we just don't know yet. But we remain optimistic. We're prepared to run the program successfully and safely for all the students as long as governments and schools allow it. And that's kind of where we stand overall with the situation. And we will keep you guys updated of any developments in that regard if there's going to be late starts or cancellations. But right now we're focused on just running the program well and successfully in the coming fall.
And we keep placing students. We're getting new placements every day. In
Yeah.
fact, we are ahead than last year comparing to our statistics.
Yeah. So, and the reason why, so the first question I have is if a student was applying for this August 2020 and they want to transfer to the next year, do they have to complete everything in their application again? The answer is no. They don't have to redo the entire application, but we are going to ask that they update certain documents like their academics, their medical records. There will be certain things that need updates, but we won't ask that they do the entire process over again. One question I had is, do you place boys and girls in the same family? It is possible, but they would never be in the same bedroom. Generally, we try to avoid that, but it is a possibility. What if a student wants to join the orientation program in New York, but has not been placed in the host family by any of the dates the program is offered? This is a great question. So any students, when you're completing the application, they mark whether or not they're interested in doing the New York orientation. And students that mark that they're interested in doing the New York orientation, we do place the priority on trying to place them sooner so that they can participate. If for whatever reason we're not able to place them in time to participate, then we just will not charge them the additional fee for that program. One question we had is the embassies are closed. Do you have any information about what's going to happen and when they're going to reopen? Unfortunately, I don't have any real specific information. We're being told that they're preparing to open by July, maybe late June. But I really don't have anything official or specific in terms of updates on embassies around the world. It's going to be different in every country, I believe. And it's something that we're really hoping to see them start to open even in the next couple of weeks. We're really expecting them to open by mid-July, the latest. Of
And
course, we'll
James, in Brazil, for example, in São Paulo, I know that our students have just scheduled their interviews for the first week of August.
Cassandra Mănâncă?
But you will have your DS 2019 forms in your offices very soon. Maybe some of them you have already received, so you can actually go ahead and, if it's available, schedule your interviews.
Right. Someone had asked, is there any way to have the insurance details with documents? And yes, all that information is actually already uploaded in exits in the agent resources section. But if you can't find it, don't worry. Send me an email and I'd be glad to send that to you directly. Someone had asked if we're going to share the presentation. Absolutely. I'll send you a note with a link to the presentation. We're also going to have a recording of the webinar. Someone asked, what if a student lives in an area where they cannot reach a test center for the LTIS test? We're still going to be accepting the paper tests through at least January 2021. And so students can take that test at your office. But I do believe that the online test would allow them to take it. They don't have to take it at an official test center. They're able to take it at home as long as there's someone not related to them that can proctor their exam. What will happen for 2020-21 if a student has paid the full fees but does not get a placement? If a student is not placed, if we do not fulfill our side of placing the student by the deadline, we would refund those fees. But I will say again, in all my time working for ISC, we always place by the deadline. Are all of the schools of the students that are already placed opening in August or September for 2020? I can't answer that question. They're planning to open in some form or another, but it's not guaranteed. There are so many things that could happen between now and August and September that could change that. But right now, schools are planning to open in some form for the fall. What are the commitments assumed by the host families according to what they have signed with you regarding the stay of the students? If they have a conflict with the student, do they get them out of the house without time in advance? That's a particular question. It does depend on the circumstances, but the host families are given a full orientation and overview in terms of what the expectations are of them for the program. In emergencies where the student needs to be removed from a home immediately, we would typically move them to the local area representative's home in those instances so that they're somewhere safe with an ISE representative while we sort out whatever the possible issue could be. If a student has already studied an F1 program, can they do a J-1 program? That's a great question, and unfortunately the answer is no. Students that have completed an F1 high school program are not eligible for the J-1 program. So when we consider this, I always suggest students do J-1 first. If they know they want to do 2 years in the United States or multiple years, and they want to do it the most affordable way is to do a J-1 program the first year and then transfer to one of our more affordable F1 programs, for example, F1 Private Basic, for their second or their third years. But once a student has acquired an F1 high school visa, they're no longer eligible to apply for a J-1 high school visa.
By the way, this year we have J-1 students who are going to stay here in America over the summer and apply and change their status to F1. That's also possible. So if your current J-1 students or other students would like to apply to our F1 private program, we can actually help them to change their status and apply to one of our schools.
Correct. Just another question, any info about COVID-19? Are the schools accepting our students? We are still getting school acceptances. We are still getting school placements and host family placements. So the answer is yes, but those schools are also able to rescind that acceptance at any time based on the development of the situation. So I'm not able to make 100% guarantees on anything like that right now, unfortunately. Do the students have to take the English exam? Yes. Yes, the LTIS test is required for all of our applicants unless they're coming from an English-speaking country. That's the only situation really where we would waive that requirement. Someone asks, is there any chance that we start late this year because of the delay in visa processing and restricted flights? It is a possibility. There is no deadline set just yet. We're waiting to hear from the Department of State, from the schools, to get some guidance from the government. But right now, we're kind of just prepared to adapt to the situation no matter how it develops. So it is a possibility that there could be late starts this August and September, yes.
Schools are discussing different possibilities for this August-September semester, from 2 shifts in the morning and afternoon to bigger distance between the desks, to some classes online, maybe 3 times a day they go to school, twice a week, 3 times a week they go to school, and then other 2 days they stay home. There is still not a final policy exactly what's going to happen, but we are expecting to hear from the schools very soon.
Another question is, what happens if the student receives the visa later than the opening of the school? That's a great question. That's just pretty much the same as, will there be late starts allowed? We're hoping that there will be, but that's a Department of State and school decision. And so we are encouraging them to allow for that, but it'll ultimately be a decision that they make, which they haven't made yet. The next question is, when will we have the 2021-22 prices and conditions? I'm actually very glad to say that we're going to keep our pricing from this year the same for next year. So the pricing, the J-1 program pricing, this only applies to J-1, but the program pricing that you've received for J-1 for this year, for 2020-21, will be the same for 2021-22. Someone said, we have heard some high schools are not accepting international students. Do you have any information in this regard? I'm sure that's true. I'm sure there are some schools that are not accepting international students. If that's the case and we had a student placed at a school like that, we would cancel the placement and start looking for a new placement. I haven't heard that happening too much, though. That doesn't seem to be something that's very common yet. Another question, this is a great one. Is it possible for a student that's just completed SMG Canada program to participate in the J-1 program? And the answer is yes, absolutely. What kind of documents does a student receive upon completion of the program? All students will receive an official transcript that confirms and validates the courses that they've taken and the credits that they've earned. We also sometimes get requests from partners for certificates of achievement. Those are not provided by default, but if you request them, we can make them up for you and send them. One question is, are we keeping the insurance costs the same? Because we are keeping our program fees the same for next year. And I can't say for sure right now if insurance prices will remain the same, because that's going to be determined by the insurance company, who has still not confirmed pricing for next year. I will likely have that confirmed for you by, I would say, the winter, probably around the new year. Are we having any trouble placing students from certain countries due to the high number of COVID cases? To be honest, I don't think so. I haven't heard anything like that. I know that a lot of the countries that are affected more severely have fewer students applying this year than they normally would, so that is probably offsetting any difficulties that we would have placing those students. But as far as I understand, the placements have really continued to come in at a very encouraging rate. We're placing students with host families and at schools every day, even during the crisis, which is one of the things that has kept us real positive and optimistic, is that the volunteer host families are still eager to welcome international students. And I personally feel like this program is going to be more important than ever, because we're all feeling very cut off from each other, and these types of programs are the types of things that can hopefully bring us back together. Those are all of the questions that I have in the chat. If anybody wants to submit anything else, I'll wait a couple of minutes. You're free to also unmute your microphone and state your question if you'd like, because I think we only have a few people still here, about 60. But I just want to say, for anyone that might be leaving now, thank you guys so much for being here today. It's, again, super encouraging for us to see so many of our partners still interested in learning about the program and asking wonderful questions and passionate about what we do. we remain real passionate and really excited for the programs that we offer, and we look forward to continuing to run these programs and provide these experiences for all our wonderful international students and friends all over the world.
Thank you, everyone. It's really good to see you guys. Stay in touch, okay? And stay well, stay healthy.
I will, I promise, because everyone's asked several times, I will share the presentation. We'll share a recording of the webinar itself. And I'll share, and if you have anything else that you need, you guys can always email me and I'll be glad to help you. Okay. Thank you all very much. Take care.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. Good luck.